Emotional algebra, where the heart meets the math. What is integral is derivative as you figure out your path. Power plus emotions equals more than you can see. Listening to the wisdom of
Hey guys,
our
it's
host, Dr.
Pixelated
E.
Apollo, aka Trent, and we are back here with Emotional Algebra. And today we're going to be talking about AI, and I'm going to be a special guest co-host for today. And here we are with Dr. E.
Hey guys, again, welcome back. I thought we'd start this out again, just bringing in our awesome, well-experienced co-host here, who's had his channel on YouTube for more than 10 years with over 980,000 subscribers, and we had again had some discussions. This is as I teased in the last episode. This is the second episode as co-host, as Andrew's taken the month off to spend some time with family and get some life done outside of the emotional algebra world. So, as an experienced YouTuber, Trent and I had talked about the state of AI and some of his feelings. And I know this is something we've done multiple episodes on, whereas I feel like right now in the kind of psychology of our culture, AI is really important. I talked about how life mimics AI. I talked about how AI is in many ways, we can't get away from it. It's not in many ways, we can't get away from AI. It's coming whether we like it or not. And I really want people to look at and consider their emotions around it, their attitudes around it, understand the things that are coming, and approach it from a standpoint of how can I understand and embrace what's coming rather than resist it and fight it. And Apollo had some great ideas and great thoughts on some of the parallels that he sees historically in this. And again, we also wanted to talk about what are the different attitudes that people have in what segments of culture. So again, where do you want to take the discussion?
Yeah, what I would like to talk about with what's really fascinating about this, we're in a new revolution, an AI revolution, and it, like you said, it very much mirrors and rhymes with the Industrial Revolution. And I'm one of my role models, Tolkien, of the author of Lord of the Rings, he was a big anti-industrial guy. He would not go to a pub that had a radio. He wanted that connection. And a lot of the themes of Lord of the Rings is nature versus industry. You see like Isengard becoming industrial, destroying nature. And so I naturally have a very concerned and negative viewpoint on AI. I obviously see the potential. I've seen cases where AI has identified cancer cells that doctors couldn't, things like that. But I am very concerned about AI's effect on the human psyche and the same negative effects that the Industrial Revolution had on loneliness, isolation, losing jobs, a lack of connection. And how do we go about managing that? Because obviously we don't want to reject AI because it can be very beneficial, but I think it needs guide rails as well.
Absolutely. And, one of my concerns that we talked about in our previous episode is that our government took the guardrails off in the way that they wanted AI because they didn't want to discourage development and competition. And I think that even Sam Altman brought up the idea that with ChatGPT, the 5th generation coming out, he even said this needs to be guardrails. For him, he saw it as a repetition of the Manhattan Project in some ways. So in some ways, that could be hyperbole and marketing the thing. Whereas I think that they're seeing more and more and more, even the people behind the scenes in it, how this can be used, what can be done with it, and is it a tool or a weapon? So we look at those different emotions of fear, concern, worry, terror, panic, even a lot of people feeling helpless about what's coming and stopping the change. So a lot of times when people feel overwhelmed, which is another one of those emotions, overwhelmed almost often has us hunkering down and hiding under all the emotions, beliefs, feelings, attitudes, and or it has us running like heck from it. Sometimes both. So I think you have a lot of people really feeling overwhelmed with the change. If it's your job, am I going to lose my job? That brings up fear, insecurity, helplessness, could be preemptive hopelessness. And there's nothing that people are doing wrong if they become downsized. The key, as I see it, is to be proactive. Because if you become part of the innovation and you become part of the change, you're less likely to be left behind. So that's where, Trent, as you're talking about these issues of fear and the negativity towards it is, even you look at J.R.R. Tolkien, could he have built his brand by going on radio, by embracing radio, and even saying, hey, I want to read some of my stuff on radio? Or did he potentially shoot himself in the foot? And now we're loving Tolkien years later, whereas maybe people could have loved it sooner. So that's where, again, you and I have talked about ways that you're embracing AI and helping you automate some of the things you're doing. I use it. I embrace it wholeheartedly, even in right now developing some of the models that I'm working with and having it help me guide in the development of some of the models that I'm doing with my work and with my practice and with business that I'm working on monetizing.
Yeah. And I wanted to get your opinion because you brought up resistance to AI. Do you think
Vive la résistance.
Exactement. Do you think that something beautiful could come out of resistance? Because when I think of the Industrial Revolution, I think also the rise of the romance, all these the connection to this, to imagination in nature, because they felt so displaced by this new era of machinery and people longed for that connection. Do you think that not necessarily resistance is completely negative? It can be beneficial to rekindle that human spirit.
Right. Yeah. There's so much potential now. Resistance to this might foster other industries, other development of communities, as well as in the integration of the resistance into even how AI grows, even how it develops. We look at COVID. What came out of COVID that people would say was positive? Well, you know what? People realize quality of life. People realize, I don't want to keep living in this city, trapped in this small place. I want to be connected to nature. I'm going to move out to the suburbs. I want to have ownership of this, or I want to be more connected to nature. So absolutely. Now, the other side of that resistance is that resistance so much that it impedes the individual? And or is it so much that it impedes development? Now, pragmatism, as I've talked about before, when I talked about the progression of logic to terror in the development of AI and the emergence of AI, pragmatism says, let's be careful and let's be planful. It's more the logical approach to things. And then worry says, okay, well, be aware of this and what might be. But resistance for the sake of resistance, I think, lacks awareness. It potentially lacks a full knowledge. What I've appreciated about getting to know you is your love of history. And even here, as the saying has been made so many times, people who do not learn from history are doomed to repeat it. So from the standpoint of resistance, we can look at many times of resistance and see great things that came from it. We can also look at our revolution. Our country would not exist as it does today without resistance historically. Right. Whereas also the other side of resistance, that is resisting for the sake of resisting, defiance just to divide, and what not understanding the deeper emotions. We can learn from that history of how it potentially kept greater things from happening or great things from happening. I think what underlies a lot of the resistance is mistrust in those who are creating these technologies. It's a feeling of betrayal by those jobs that are being taken away. I know, look at artists are feeling threatened. Content creators are feeling threatened. People in their jobs who they realize they're replaceable by AI. even whether it's people who act as receptionists, people who are support people in businesses, people who might do accounting, so and other of these more automated things and stuff. Wow, look at what happened when the horse went away, and when the trains came, and then the cars came. With each of those disruptions in technology, look at how the world changed. I think our economies are going to have to change, because you won't have all these people who are employed who can feed in the economy. Something has to give there, or we economically are going to have serious issues. So, I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
No, you bring up a good point about the job replacement, because there is, I read somewhere in 2025 so far, over 77,000 jobs have been replaced. And that's roughly 491 people losing their job every day.
Mm-hmm.
And there is a concern about, well, just like the Industrial Revolution, it brought about many luxuries, things we don't have to worry about anymore. And with AI coming in, I just have a lot of doubt that there's been ideas that, AI is going to come in so we don't have to work as much. And because of that, we're going to have stimulus packages coming in, because there's not going to be that many jobs, and we're just going to live off the benefit of AI. And I just have...
Where's that money going to come from?
I assume you would have to tax, some sort of tax on the companies that are utilizing this AI, that are generating a lot of income, that would
So you're paying people to sit around then?
Exactly. That's the problem. Because if AI comes in, and there's no doubt it's going to replace a ton of jobs, you're going to have issues of, even if the stimulus package came in and people got a income per month, you can use that to control people. You can, if someone says something wrong, cut them off. You lost your right to your money.
In some ways, it's already happening.
100%. If you have the wrong opinion,
even without AI in some situations.
No, it's definitely for sure. But I think it'll be amplified with AI, and the fear of the lack of purpose. I mean, jobs provide purpose. And I think if people feel like they can't do something and provide for their family, that's going to be a huge psychological, that's just, already as a nation, we're one of the most depressed nations in the world, yet we have all this abundance. We have all these things. And I think AI potentially could just amplify that even more.
And I think that's understanding the emotions behind it. People don't. So again, anxiety comes from helplessness. Depression comes from hopelessness, in my humble opinion. So we're looking at a lot of people who feel very helpless. And the longer you feel helpless, the more likely you are to feel hopeless. So there's a lot of people who feel little hope, no hope, and all the other emotions that come with it. So if we go back in time now and we look at where cultures were barter based, people who, when there was barter, they did often things that they loved. They expressed their talents, and their talents were appreciated, and that became kind of a monetary unit of exchange. And then money came. And when money came into it, it started to place a value on things, and that value was often artificial in ways. So remember, when I said that we're on the precipice of potentially a great change and evolution in our system of economies, are we potentially changing our economy to what becomes more of a barter-based system again, where people can't necessarily work making the money because their job's been replaced? Maybe they are doing something that they love. Maybe this is part of returning back to the situation to where we have to see that as long as we value ourselves based on dollars and our portfolios in a potentially evolved system of barter-based, portfolios have no meaning anymore. It's what did I produce today? What can I produce tomorrow? What can I share in that? And how do people see my intrinsic value, the value of the things that I offered? So it does, if we look at it from an expanded view, then we can start to see almost through AI. If you asked AI, my job's going away, what would be your recommendations for me finding economic fulfillment, emotional fulfillment, for me expanding what I do? And I wonder, I wonder what AI would say. And maybe I'll add a follow-up to this episode and add that to it on asking AI that exact question.
Yeah, and there is a sense that change always happens, and like you said, the horse and buggy was replaced, and many people lost jobs.
Mm-hmm.
They lived there, they trained their whole lives to make saddles or build these carriages, and
Mm-hmm.
now they're out of a job, and you have to adapt. I think with AI, it's at a rate that's very alarming to where
Yes.
people don't have time to adapt and change. And I like what you said, that AI could provide us more of an opportunity to go back to that. And that's something I really value, is when I see someone who's very skilled at a very specific task. Like I
Mm-hmm.
saw one guy who makes wooden coffins, and it was really beautiful because he took his time. He was an expert at it, and it was a spiritual sense because he's building this. This is, for someone who's passed, and it's a very
Mm-hmm.
emotional, and I really value that. And it would be interesting if AI does provide that, where people kind of connect to more of a physical profession, or more of a hobby in a sense. But again, it goes back to, I have no faith that AI will be utilized in a sense to empower people by those who run it. Just through looking at history and the human condition, I'm really concerned in that regard.
It's and in that, what you want to look at in that feeling, again, to bring this out, because I think you're not alone in that feeling, and that's why so many people want guardrails on. And we've seen our culture that has emerged into this billionaire culture of really becoming more and more of haves and have-nots, is really what people feel afraid we're moving towards. Is we have to look at how have we allowed our value to continue to be defined by those outside of us, and how in that view are we becoming a part of this growth and revolution? And how do we resist that idea of feeling marginalized, feeling used, feeling left behind? So we want to change the intrinsic values of the culture. That's exactly why I do emotional algebra. That's exactly why for 30 years I've been teaching about equity versus hierarchy. And let me give you a great parallel that's going to this. So back in the mid 2000s, when they realized that they were trying to phase out coal because it being a dirty fuel, as they say, they offered to many of the coal miners to re-educate them to learn how to do computer-based programming and technology programming. And many of those people resisted it. If we went back again throughout, that's just one experience, one situation in the history. So when people are often offered a way out because of fear, because of doubt, because of the risk of failure, because they don't want to feel stupid, and all those feelings that we have turned into these hierarchical experiences of bad and wrong and weak, we resist the opportunities to change and grow. And either we feel like we have to float through it and keep our head above water, or we're going to drown in it. Or I think, like I said, we can embrace the opportunity for change and evolution. Because I do feel like, yes, while there may be times when AI is used as a profit tool for those few, they're going to realize somewhere in there, and hopefully sooner than later, that they have to make this change with us, not for themselves. This has to be a we issue, not a me issue. If our culture, our economies, our world is really going to survive without you having third world countries within a first world country.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring up the learn to code, is I think the movement. And what's interesting about that is, there was a ton of journalists they lost their jobs, and people in a snooty and a kind of vengeful way said, learn to code. Because a lot of these journalists were pushing that idea of these coal miners to learn to code. And so they were kind of, and what happened is that social media started to ban that phrase, protecting these journalists. And there's this fear of those who run AI are going to be the arbiters of truth. That
Yes.
yeah. So there's an issue of them controlling the narrative, them telling you what is right and wrong, and just a lack of control. I mean, we even saw this with, I mean, regardless of your opinion on like the vaccine for COVID, certain ideas were banned that later came out to be true or partially true, and
Mhm.
there's a sense of fear of losing that
Right.
yeah, kind of being oppressed by this machine.
Well, and going to that whole idea of people who don't learn from history, you look at the Dark Ages. The Dark Ages were contributed to by a number of different factors, while a lot of people historically credit that to the power of the Catholic Church. That some theorists who say that the world lost centuries of development, that who knows where the world would be in that. And I know often we say things in post history that seem like hyperbole. I think we want to, though, look at this idea that we as individuals are still part of a whole. We as individuals can make sure that we communicate our concerns and not fall into that learned helplessness. And if we look at history and see these patterns, which patterns are we going to latch onto, first of all? And then how are we going to make sure that we don't follow into those patterns within our life, within our communities, within our country's history, within our world history? So I noticed that you kind of had that face when I commented on the loss of potential technology development during that Dark Ages. So
Well, I think there's a lot of misconception because the Dark Age, even historians today do not like using that term, because there's a misconception that Dark Age, as in it was gloomy and you were oppressed, but it's more rather of a lot of written documents were lost, and you could actually contribute the Catholic Church to writing and preserving a lot of written knowledge. But even with the Renaissance or or any kind of industrial revolution, any kind of era where there's this boom, you do lose something, whether good or bad. You're progressing in a sense that you lose something of value, such as even now we have email, but we've lost the beauty of a handwritten letter.
Mm-hmm.
And sure, you can still do it, you can still write it, but very, very few people actually write a handwritten letter.
Mm-hmm.
So when these changes come, you know, there is this natural fear of losing something, even in the sense of, I mean, AI and technology in general. When we look at even McDonald's, where there's everything's like touch, you make your order on a touch screen, or if you go to the grocery store and they have self checkout, we don't know the consequences. It may be small, but the lack of those little human interactions that we're losing out on. And with social media coming out, you also see that, oh, this is a great way to connect with so many people, but yet now nobody's connecting at all face to face. So it's kind of this, I have this fear in regards to the AI. What are we going to lose? And what is going to get worse in terms of that human connection?
And to me, again, historically, things have to get worse often to get better, unfortunately. We don't often paint the purpose of pain, as in all the different emotions it comes through, and even physical pain often promotes growth, change. Sadness lets us know when we feel pain, and therefore we want to change something. Often people, though, feel hopeless, so they fall in the idea that they can't change. Failure only says that it's time to learn. Stupid says I've experienced multiple failures. So again, if we looked at each emotion from a standpoint of equity rather than hierarchy, again, good, bad, right, wrong, strong, weak, win, lose, versus looking at the adaptive purpose in what this emotion is trying to teach us, tell us, show us, do for us, then we would see our way through these situations with a lot less disruption. Our direct disruption is caused by ourselves. and by our collective views because of things that have been taught for ages, for eons of time that we absorb, and as this is just the way it is. And I'll say it directly, bullshit. We have to realize our power to choose change, our power to say, I want something different, our power to say not to resist AI because it's coming no matter what, to say, let's make sure we all have a hand and we don't let one or two people determine to take the guardrails off of this development, to allow just for what is profit motivated versus people motivated. And we're seeing a lot of actions today that are profit motivated and money motivated, and to remove the person. And this is why we all want to be the ones with the nice bank account. Look at it realistically. It's not going to happen that way. We all can't be billionaires. So often people have that carrot dangled in front of their nose. And I think that's the American dream, is having that carrot dangled in front of your nose. And it keeps our eye off of, to me, what we really want to focus on in the present. And that's where, like I said, I'm using AI to help me with my podcast, obviously, to help me and use it for the songs, and not to replace musicians, but to use music as a tool to help. I'm using it to develop a model in that I've been working with. In working with Copilot, it's just a critique on the promise of AI. Copilot, I started an agent. I'm entering all these things to build this model that I'm working on. And then when I go back to the chat, I said, print out the transcript. It says, and the agent says, I don't have that information. I was like, what? I mean, isn't an agent supposed to be like a secretary kind of thing, kind of
Right.
taking notes and stuff like that, an assistant? And it absolutely didn't have any. So all that hours of work I did that I'm expecting to print out so I can take this to a developer and say, okay, this is what I came with my homework, it's gone. So I think we have to look at, in that situation, I was expecting AI to do more than it was either able to do or allowed to do or whatever, but I leaned on that too much, and now I have to recreate all that. So that's another piece of this, is be careful how much you're leaning on AI to live your life for you or do those things for you as well.
Yeah, not only, and that's a good point, because not only did you mention that it didn't work out, it didn't function the way you expected, but there's been studies, I think a MIT study, saying that the overuse of AI is actually making you dumber because you're critically thinking less.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it even myself, like, for example, I think I had a friend that had a dispute with his landlord, and he had to write a letter, and he's like, I don't know how to approach this. He's a very good writer, but he then used AI to write something, and it made a lot of sense. And there you think, okay, that's convenient. It's not an art, right? It's a practical letter explaining an issue that you have with your property.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same sense, you do lose critical thinking in that moment. And I have such a concern with even such being in the YouTube industry. You look at like shorts, or like these short form videos that are purely there to, some are beneficial, but the majority are there to get the dopamine rush. And you just kind of go in this state of like a vegetable state of you're just existing. And now there's AI videos that people are making. So if you get on TikTok, nothing's real, and you're spending hours on there watching these silly videos. And it's really, like you said, major guardrails need to be implemented. And this is really just the tip of the iceberg of issues.
Well, remember back, well, you won't because you're not that old, but, and I talked about this in another episode, in the 80s when synthesized music came out, and everybody felt afraid that it was going to replace musicians and instruments, and you just have synthesized bands. And there was a revolution for a little bit about that, and then people brought it back to wanting to see the live music and all the artists again. I think we want to see that, yes, there's going to be experiment into this. There's going to be growth into it. Well, people are going to want to return to human interaction, to doing these tasks, to, like you're saying, when I did my letter that I wrote to that guy, I used AI to help me craft a response, to help me kind of remove my ping for, my emotion, to start with it. And then I added a whole bunch of content that was my own content, because I didn't just want it to be AI. So that comes back to the idea is see AI as a tool, not as a replacement. I think so many people who are working smarter, and you said it's going to decrease the amount of work. I have not been busier in the last 20 years than now, because it enables me to create my podcast and to then write my, and I do that all manually, and I edit it manually. And then I go to YouTube and create my description using AI. And then I have the shorts that I have to pick out manually. And then I look, how do I find the titles and things like that with help from AI and stuff. And then I create the songs, and so there's all these things that I'm doing, as well as building other things. All I really have to do is sit in my office every day and talk to people. I see this as a new frontier. And that's where I think for you, I think people could say, well, you were part of that AI revolution. You were part of that technological revolution into YouTube. Aren't you kind of hypocritical with the attitudes that you have?
No, I agree. I agree with, and that's why I'm not 100% against AI. I think it can be utilized as a tool. There's just some major concerns. And like you said, it's a give and pull kind of situation. The pendulum kind of swings. Hence the romantic era in art during the Industrial Revolution. It created this, like, I want to return to nature. And it's funny, there's a story about ancient Greeks where when books became more common, the elders would be like, all these young kids reading books. No, they're just wasting their time reading these books. They should be out living their lives. So there's always this hesitation when something comes out. I think it was Socrates who said something to, I'm paraphrasing, but like, a good philosopher keeps everything in their head. They don't need to write anything down. And the only reason we know that quote is because one of his students wrote that down.
Right. Right.
So there's definitely a chance for even new art to form, like video games being an art form exists because of technology and AI. So there's definitely potential for new creation, new mediums, in new things that can really help humanity. I guess I'm a bit pessimistic about those in charge and AI being something so drastically different and stronger, more powerful than, say, the Industrial Revolution, that really has me concerned. I mean, even he's known as the grandfather of AI, I believe is his title, but it's Geoffrey Hinton. I don't know if you've heard of, but he left his position at Google, and he did it so he could freely voice his opinion on AI. And he showed concern about AI surpassing human intelligence. And he has been really critical, and we've spoken about this, about companies focusing on profit over safety. And again, that reminds me of child labor in the Industrial Revolution. Now, thankfully, we overcame that as a people, and we put in these guide rails. But I feel like something very sad or dangerous has to happen for most people to open their eyes to the dangers of AI.
Yeah, I'm with you on that too. And that's where, if you look at, again, learning from history, if only we would learn. And you can really forecast things out if you look pragmatically and carefully at things. A lot of history you could really look at and say, yeah, this is where we're leading. And people are like, no, that's not going to happen. So I think right now, a lot of people who are running that industry, and I think a lot of people who are in positions of power, are coming from a place of arrogance. I think our culture has fostered that arrogance and those narcissistic attitudes and beliefs and behavior systems. And arrogance has historically, and you, again, I'm so impressed with your knowledge of history and awareness of it and weaving it in, is history's been the downfall of almost every empire throughout time. As we look at what happened within the machinations of that culture, the machinations of that leadership, the machinations of how then they started to force their will. I find it one of the comments that you crossing over a couple of things that you brought up were that you're concerned about AI leaders becoming the arbiters of truth. And then we talked about we know what we know in ways about history because of the Catholic Church, because they wrote things down back in time and in ways in their own way. And what they chose to write down, what they did write down and record it, they became the arbiters of truth because that is now our history. And going back to Socrates and saying when writing came, people only know what Socrates said because it was written down. So we see in those different ways and changes in technology, and the proliferation of books, the proliferation of what the printing press brought, the proliferation of what newspapers over time brought in spreading news, and then the ability to manipulate news. And therefore, news today is what's new, right? Tomorrow, it's going to be history. We don't often chew on that history. Really, we can't really call history, according to some historians, until we look back 30 years in time, because then things are solidified.
Yeah, and I think you try to focus on a net positive, and that's why that's why I'm sad in a sense. Even looking at history, that when there's change, you do lose something. There's always something lost that people will long for. Even with news in social media, you have so much. Never in our history of humanity have we been bombarded by so much information, and most of it is garbage. Most of it is not important, or
and
it's rage.
Untrue.
Yeah, or it's rage bait, where because they generate more money because more people are going to click on something that's upsetting than positive. So there, and then social media, there's less human interaction, there's less connection, and so there's times where I think I wish I was a teenager in the 80s. Like there's times where because
no, you don't.
I'm a slave to this. I'm a slave to this phone. As much as I hate it, I'll catch myself doom scrolling, and I'm like, what am I doing? And you watch old 80s, like someone will have like a home recorder, or even in the 90s, and these kids in high school, no phone in sight, pure human interaction, and those are things that are gone now. And and you have to be really attentive, really focused on trying to get that back. There's times where I turn off my phone and I'm got to be really thinking of it. So I guess I don't know how exactly I'm trying to express it's a sadness in a sense that the world is changing, which I think is just natural.
Yeah, and change is always going to happen. There again, another Zen koan says, "Grandfather dies, son dies. This is good fortune." And what's meant by that is often people look at that as tragedy, but what it says is change is going to happen always. Things that you know now are going to come they're going to go. Whether it's a family member, a friend, a job, an education. When I talk to people who start their senior year, I'm like, how do you feel about this year? And more, there are a lot of times that when kids are starting their senior year in high school, they're like, I feel kind of sad. I'm like, why? I says, well, because this is ending. Now I've got to be an adult, or now this has got to happen. And I go back to that saying, feel happy that it happened, and sad that sad, not but sad, not sad, but to say you can feel both. So feel excitement for what can come and recognize that, change is coming. Was that Bob Dylan? I think that.
He's got a lot of good. Yeah.
So I think in that it's really looking at all these pieces. Be a part of it, of the change. Don't be apart from it. The more you keep your finger on the pulse of the changes, and the more you can, we have to go through, unfortunately, our elected officials. We live in a republic, not a democracy. So we have to let our officials know. And I think there's so much fear out there and so much learned helplessness that people are like, well, it's going to happen. And I say no. And again, that's why, again, I try to have these discussions. And you and I don't agree about everything. And even, Andrew and I don't agree about everything, where we have, because of that, we have fruitful discussions. And
Right.
I love your idea, your really observation that we have serious issues in our culture with critical thinking and analysis, with all that we're looking for AI to do for us. And we don't have to remember phone numbers anymore. Like I still know, my
Or
wife's number.
GPS.
Yeah.
You
My
lose skills.
daughter's never had to learn how to follow a map on paper. She just puts it in and it tells her where to turn. So exactly. And that's spatial reasoning. And so all those skills, our brain, I think we are, I wouldn't say getting dumber. We're not being exposed to things that stimulate brain progress, growth, evolution, and even maintenance. Because if you don't use it, you're going to lose it. And that's been shown many, many times.
Yeah.
So be aware to still make this world manual and live in concert with technology. I think that might be an approach that people could take. And so for, as we look at a lot of these comments that we looked at is that the people who have negative feelings about AI are often people who really don't understand all of it. But people are concerned, from privacy and human rights activists are concerned about it, AI being used for mass surveillance, misinformation, or algorithmic discrimination. And they want strict regulation. Labor and ethics groups fear AI will lead to widespread job displacements, which we covered. Warn of economic inequality and bias in systems used for hiring, policing, or finance. So I think that we want to look at, again, like I said, artists, writers, and creators. Work with it. My daughter's at SCAD, and they're teaching the students how to use AI. An article today that I heard about is either Apple, I think it might be Apple or Google. They're putting $1 billion into educating college students on how to use AI. Smart move, but also, again, it's bringing along people rather than just leaving them in the dust. So in that way, you're seeing those companies that are benefiting from AI being smart and trying to give back. Does it build their customer base? Absolutely. Does it help potentially people think of creative ways to find employment, to get a major that, most jobs in 20 years may not exist, whereas many of the jobs people have in 20 years haven't even been created yet.
Yeah, it is very fascinating, and I agree with the not being afraid of progress. I think there's a potential of a perfect storm where, if people are less critical thinking, if they're losing their jobs, if those in AI are gaining more control, if they're the arbiters of truth, they can have complete control over a huge population of people. So definitely, and I think people should be excited, but also focus on concerns. And I hope people don't lose sight on that, because as you mentioned, we are a culture of very individualistic and material gaining. We want money, cars, all these things that we think are going to make us happy. And I fear that people will lose sight on the importance of community and the importance of looking after each other. And I worry that AI is going to amplify that.
Yeah.
But what would you say what is your, I think, as a therapist, as you've worked with people struggling with isolation, depression, what is your biggest concern, or do you have a concern about AI potentially amplifying that? Or because
my biggest concern is seeing the number of people who are really starting to have conversations and build relationships with chatbots, and that they, so when I was creating my models, every time I create a new thing, a new component to what I'm trying to build and create here, I just said it's virtual air up my ass is what I call it. I told my wife, I said, listen to this wonderful virtual air being blown up my ass, because what I would say, that's a great idea. This is a wonderful way to put this. So in giving those compliments and the way often that conversation comes, it draws people into that attaboy, which we're often looking for from other people. And if other people haven't really learned how to communicate and engage, and I think the art of communication, just like the art of writing the letter, is being lost more and more, then yeah, we're losing our connection. We're losing communities. So that's why I like to do community building stuff. That's why I teach about the ways we look at power and emotions to help people understand. Realize this person is often responding because of the emotions they're feeling, not because of you. Because they don't understand what's going on inside, not because of you. And because they don't understand themselves, they can't understand you. And because you don't understand yourself, you can't understand them. Right. So in that, as we get more dependent and more involved with informal and impersonal technologies, I think we're going to lose more of that. While technology can also be used as a great tool to teach us and to help us learn and try things through the way, even it might give us that feedback. But if other people are basically putting a lot of garbage out there to us and we're not, and we just feel criticized by them, then we're going to seek out places where we feel like we can be told how great we are.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. It's that again, that give and take, and AI, the growth of AI could, in fact, I read a study that more people today are becoming religious. And that is because they're longing for community. They're longing for a sense of higher purpose. And that's something that's been slowly being destroyed by technology, by AI. And I think for the first time in like 20 years, the rate of atheism has plateaued. So it's the rise of the romanticism, which I'm a romantic at heart, so I'm pretty excited about that. But yeah, what's your opinion on, some people have a linear view on history, that humanity is just progressing and getting better and better and better. Do you ever feel like there's a point where what is good? What is considered beneficial for mankind? Because there's times where, and maybe I romanticize the past and I go, wouldn't it be nice to just live in a medieval village and everybody knows each other and you have a job and a purpose and a meaning? I might die way sooner, but I'll die happy. Or do I want to live in today's society where I feel disconnected? I might live 100 years or more, but I'm miserable. And you can see the general population being miserable. So what is your thoughts on that?
I think, well, if we look at it, I think history is like the stock market. If you look overall, there's been growth. While there's been some of those, the micro level, you look at the zigs and zags, the ups and downs. So I kind of look at it as that. Over generally, though, I think there's been obviously changes in evolution. While evolution does not necessarily mean growth, evolution is often measured by changes in technology and changes in things that we can do and abilities and life expectancy and stuff. So I think you're absolutely right. I want people to have a quality of life, not just a quantity of life. Yeah. So I think that's where, if we look at it, why do people feel so much sadness, hopelessness, helplessness, all these emotions that I talk about on here, is because I think we're getting further and further away from understanding our emotion, that life is much more complex now in ways. It moves much quicker. We don't have the time to sit around and process and feel. And while we have the ability to know and understand because of how science has progressed, how psychology has progressed, the tools that we have, are we really using those tools to our benefit? And that's where the more isolated we get. This is emotion school. I'll say it a million times. This place we live in is emotion school. And this is where we're supposed to learn about emotions, so we can learn our way back to love through the value and purpose of every emotion, not just the ones we like, It's every emotion teaches us something about the spectrum of what love is. That's why, again, I had those episodes on quantum emotions, where I talked about every emotion being like a different frequency. There is no wrong key on the keyboard. It's just the combination of keys that you play that make it sound right or wrong. So understanding those different things. So we have great potential now, even if we take our understanding of emotion, our understanding of psychology, and all those things that are out there, and we use social media to build stronger communities, not to tear them down. We use AI to find creative jobs for employment for everybody, or transition of economies, or how we can all benefit from it rather than a few people control it. People continue to talk about human nature, and I say, bull. That's potential for what we can do. Often when I'm working with people, I'll talk about the hall of probabilities when I do hypnotic work, and I'll say, I want you to walk down this hall of probabilities, hall of TV screens, and all these TV screens are possible futures. Which one do you see that stands out to you if you don't change anything in your life? And it's amazing what people see. Some people see, oh, well, that's not really good. I'm saying, do you want that future? No. I say, okay, now walk down that hall of probabilities and now find the future that seems most appealing to you, and watching each of those TV screens or movies play out. And often they'll go, oh, okay, I see one. I said, now from that future, back up to the choice points in your life. From that might be your future from now, but will be your past by that point. And when they look at those choice points in their life, they say, well, I have this path, I chose this one. And I had these choices for this path, I chose this one. Let's all do that, because we can look ahead and we can see choice points. Don't just be apart from life, be a part of life. Don't just be a passenger on it. Work to where your car's going, where your life is going, where your family's going, where your kids are going. And that's the key, is engaging in this situation that we feel so helpless about, and find that you can find help within yourself. Find that you can find help in your communities. And that's this discussion today, we're helping each other by these discussions. We're enjoying the heck out of this interaction, and this hopefully will benefit tens of thousands of people. And hopefully every one of your subscribers will say, hey, I want to go see what he talked about, and benefit from that,
Yeah, no, for sure. And to circle back to the previous podcast talking about anxiety, you brought up a good point about seeing what future do you see in one of these TV screens. I feel like a lot of people who suffer with anxiety, there is a fear of getting better because you have more responsibility. People are counting on you now, because before you could be like, I'm anxious, I'm staying home, leave me alone. But now that's gone. And you have to make steps to better yourself, to overcome this anxiety, and do you want to be that person that no one can count on, and you're always afraid, and is that the legacy you want? And that's something I had to really reflect on, and that really motivated me, and be like, I don't want to be this person. Even though I'm suffering, even though people with anxiety are suffering, there is still a sense of comfort in it, in a way. And realizing that, I think was very beneficial for my recovery. But great points. I honestly, I could talk about this all day, because it is truly,
and we got to wrap it up. So once again, we're almost to an hour on this one too. So I really thank you for being a part of the show, and being my sidekick here, and again, great knowledge. So and a lesson to every listener out there and viewer: learn history, understand history, see the patterns in history, and almost as important or more important, learn and understand your own history, not just the parts of it, that chapters that you like to see or read that you want to read again and again.
I have that problem.
We all do. And I think we learn from the times that feel darker, because they help us to see, again, the purpose of failure tells us time to learn. Stupid tells us we felt multiple failures. overwhelmed lets us know, back up and look at all the things you're feeling and all the histories, the beliefs, the attitudes, the emotions, the perceptions. Look at all those pieces individually to see what they're trying to tell you, teach you, show you, do for you. And that's the same thing to me we want to do with our understanding of history, because my concern is people who are in positions of power and people who are not looking at history. They're arrogantly looking only at the view that they want to see, and they're disregarding. They're only seeing this much of it because
Power,
they like
money.
to see, want to believe. And there's all of this out there.
Yeah. No, learning history, not only is it just fun to read, but it also helps with empathy. And you can learn about people that went through a crisis and how they handled it. And yeah, there's so much. That's why it's so important. People kind of poop on the liberal arts, but
Mhm.
it's so important, even with this AI, where there's a question of philosophy and ethics and morals, and it's so important. So yeah,
Well,
I
everybody's afraid of that idea of being mind controlled. Well, guess what? People who don't know history or understand even current events and the world we live in are more susceptible to mind control,
100%.
especially those who live in their own, funnel of, they stick within their silo of knowledge and their silo of news that they want to listen to and watch. Yeah, don't just watch the cheerleaders for your own team. You got to scout the other teams
Right.
to understand
Yeah.
what's going on out there. So until next time, and thanks again, Trent. We'll see y'all.